When the American market started producing compacts in the early 1960s, the mainstream brands were selling bare-bones budget cars for the most part. There soon would be better equipped options, but most of those either disappeared or moved into the mid-size segment. But by the early 1970s, full-on luxury features had moved into the mid-size market, and mid-price brands were expanding back into the compact market. Mercury reintroduced the Comet in 1971 as its own version of the Maverick. Although the two-door was a relatively small 182 inches long on a 103-inch wheelbase, weighing about 2,900 pounds, the four-door could be as big as 188 inches long on a 110-inch wheelbase and over 3,100 pounds. Initially with your choice of a 2.8-liter 170 cubic inch straight six or a 4.9-liter 302 cubic inch V8. And Pontiac, Oldsmobile, and Buick would get versions of the Chevy Nova in 1973. As the Pontiac Ventura, Oldsmobile Omega, and Buick Apollo, using an 111-inch wheelbase and being up to 195 inches long and 3,500 pounds, with engines ranging from a 4.1-liter 250 cubic inch straight six to a 5.7-liter 350 cubic inch V8. These cars were considered quite large in the rest of the world, and the idea of better equipped small cars that would be more competitive with the luxury cars from Europe was starting to gain traction. Adding luxury packages to existing compacts was simple enough and didn't involve much risk. So starting in 1974, Chrysler introduced the Plymouth Valiant Brougham and Dodge Dart Special Edition. Standard features included automatic transmission, power steering and brakes, cruise control, a simulated wood dash, a vinyl top with velour seats, rear window defrost and air conditioning, body-colored wheel covers, and hood ornaments. Although the 3.7-liter 225 cubic inch slant six was still the standard engine, with a 5.2-liter 318 optional. They were priced around $3,800, or about $1,000 more than the base models. Both were now using a 110-inch wheelbase and were 199 inches long. Dodge sold just over 12,000 the first year, and Plymouth nearly 20,000, mostly four-doors, with sales rising about 5,000 more each for 1975. Not huge numbers, but enough to be considered a success. The idea would catch on, and Chevrolet would soon introduce a similar concept, with their restyled and even bigger compacts for 1975 gaining nearly 2 inches. The luxury Chevy version was initially offered as the Nova LN, but it was renamed Concours for 1976, a name borrowed from Cadillac. Only $600 more than the now better equipped base Nova, it was nearly $4,000. And would prove quite popular. But Ford took things much more seriously. Instead of just adding content and price to the Maverick and Comet, they introduced all new models for 1975. The Ford Granada and Mercury Monarch. Like the Maverick and Comet, they were based on the Falcon, but both 2- and 4-door versions used the 110-inch wheelbase, while being 10 inches longer overall and 4 inches wider than the Maverick and Comet, with prices starting $800 higher. It fit between the Maverick and the Torino, in a segment of its own. Unlike the Maverick, they could be ordered with a bigger 5.8-liter 351 Windsor V8. And if the exterior didn't convince you as an upgrade, a look inside certainly would. Ford would even challenge buyers to compare them to luxury imports, and then look at the price difference, with the Ford often being less than a quarter of the price of a similarly sized Mercedes. There was also the new baby Cadillac, the Seville. Based on the Chevy Nova, it had a modified body structure with the wheelbase stretched 3 inches to 114 and length up to 204. As Cadillac didn't make an engine small enough for the car, an Oldsmobile 5.7-liter 350 V8 was used. In spite of its trimmer dimensions, it had an introductory price of $12,500, when an Eldorado started at $10,000 and a DeVille $9,000. It was aimed specifically at the big cars from Mercedes-Benz, and according to critics of the day, it more than succeeded in hitting its mark, and still for significantly less money. Clearly, the American compact market was changing, and in the opposite direction of most other segments, as the fuel crisis and record inflation had this segment moving upmarket instead of down. The Plymouth Valiant and Dodge Dart would be replaced by the better-equipped Volare and Aspen in 1976, up to a 113-inch wheelbase for the four-door, with a smoother, quieter ride. Even AMC would dress up the Hornet as the fancier Concorde. The Ford Maverick and Mercury Comet would be replaced by the Fox format Ford Fairlane and Mercury Zephyr in 1978, about as close as the segment got to downsizing for the period, as the four-door was on a 4-inch shorter wheelbase and 200 pounds lighter. Although they were still pretty Spartan as far as standard features, but a huge upgrade in handling. But wait, there's more. In 1977, Lincoln tried to counter the Seville with the Versailles, their own version of the Granada, but even better equipped, 3 inches longer, and with the styling cues of a Continental. And over at Dodge, if the Aspen wasn't nice enough for you, you could get an even fancier version as the Diplomat, or even fancier than that, as the Chrysler LeBaron, borrowing its name from the now defunct Imperial. A compact luxury car from a brand that as recently as 1974 offered the giant Newport as its entry-level model. Of course, as far as the American manufacturers were concerned, the segment pretty much died with the 70s, when the compact cars finally started to downsize like the rest of the industry. GM gave us the significantly more compact X-body cars in 1980 on a 105-inch wheelbase, 177 inches long, and 2,500 pounds, although the Citation was typically better equipped than the outgoing Nova. Chrysler introduced the compact K cars a year later to once again be saved by a small car, on an even shorter 100-inch wheelbase and 179 inches long and 2,300 pounds. Ford would be a bit later, not replacing the Fairmont and Zephyr until 1984, with the Tempo and Topaz World cars. On a 100-inch wheelbase, they were 176 inches long and still managed to seem like a huge upgrade at the time. While the Granada would see a second generation on the Fox format, effectively taking over as the mid-sized offering from Ford, but not for long. The second-generation Seville of 1980 was more successful than its styling might suggest, but in the new downsized American market, it was far from a luxury compact, and Cadillac's next attempt at a small luxury car was not much of an attempt at all, being based on the subcompact J-body Cavalier. Chrysler's compact LeBaron had become their full-size Fifth Avenue by 1982, and the LeBaron name would be applied to a K car, although a very nicely equipped one, while the Diplomat would carry on through the 80s as the top offering from Dodge. Today, we tend to look at these late 70s luxury compacts as just more Malaise-era cars, but in truth, they show a transition in what buyers would come to expect inside the cars, which would mean luxury and convenience features even in the smallest of entry-level cars. And they would also change the meaning of what a luxury car was supposed to be. So as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.